Welcome back to the OPEX podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by Kevin Carr from Movement as Medicine and Mike Boyle, Strength and Conditioning. On this episode, Kevin and I discuss exercise and movement as medicine for your brain and body. Guys, this was a great conversation with Kevin. I know you're really going to enjoy it. Stay with us. All right, Coach Kevin Carr, you absolute legend. Thank you so much for making time to speak with me today. How are you?
Thanks for having me on. Always happy to talk to you, Robbie.
Yeah, it's we haven't spoken in a good while. Maybe we messaged a few times over Facebook. Or I think I was wrecking your head about access to some certified functional strength coach stuff, because I was talking to Mike on the car one day, and he was like, Kevin did a great lecture. It's up on the certified functional strength coach site, and he's like, get on to Kev, and I was like, all right, I will. And then because in my mind I was like, Kev's really busy, so he probably be like, doesn't need like any hassle. But I remember I just messaged you like, absolutely bum sorted for me, and I got to watch it. Thanks.
Always good to connect with you, man. It's flying all over the place. You and I, it's hard to track down. But
well, you're flying all over the place. I pretty much just stay in this man cave of mine called my little bachelor pad and just like read like a nerd all day, So
that's I kind of envy that.
But Kev, for the listeners who aren't familiar with who you are, and even though we know each other really, really well, give us a full rundown on your background, because I know your coaching background to a certain degree. Like, you originally interned at Boyle's back in the day before you start working there. You were heavily influenced by Cressy as well. But in terms of like your family, where you're from, sports played, what college you went to, give us a bit more background on that, and then how this led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Massachusetts. So I grew up in Maynard, Massachusetts, which is a small town. I grew up probably 35, 40 minutes from MBSC. I would say like that gym was there. I didn't know it existed. But yeah, I grew up there. I'm born in Massachusetts. I went to UMass Amherst. So pretty much have spent most of my time here. And then I started working at MBSC about my freshman year of college. So I was lucky to get an early start there and go through my internship process and develop myself as a coach at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, which I think is kind of unique for a lot of people. I didn't have to kind of navigate my way around strength conditioning and find my way there. It was kind of my first foray into the field. So yeah, and then from there kind of developed Movement as Medicine, developed Certified Functional Strength Coach underneath kind of the Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning umbrella there. And I've been fortunate to have a good career there for I just said this is my 11th summer working at MBSC. I was talking to Vinny and Steve the other day, and I was like 11 summers. So very proud of that. So yeah.
Yeah, the summer that you that you first started at Boyle's was the year I interned. Like, I came literally, so you did the summer in 2009, and then were you there in 2008? No?
2008, yeah.
2008 was your first, yeah, but you were there in 2009 too. That was when like Sam Leahy interned, and then I came in the fall of that year.
Yeah.
And I interned under the great Nicole Rodriguez.
Yep, I wouldn't change it for the world. It was an unbelievable experience. I would say that might have been the hardest work I've ever had in the summer of my life, but also probably the most I learned and the most fun I had. So that was a hell of an experience.
The 14-hour days?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they don't have those anymore. We're soft on the interns now.
Yeah.
They go split shifts,
I believe they call that slavery though nowadays.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we would have got away with that anymore.
It's funny because I interviewed Dan Baker on Monday, and he's president of the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association. And he goes, it's illegal now through the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association to have an unpaid internship. So when he was answering the question, or when he was talking about the whole process, he goes, and we've gotten rid of this thing that's called slavery, working for nothing. And I was laughing, and I was thinking, Jesus, if you think that was people doing like 30 hours a week, you want to do a Boyle internship back in the day.
Oh my God!
But again, we all happily signed up for that. Now, I didn't do a summer; I did a fall, but it was still a long enough day. You were there from 12 in the afternoon till 8 at night. Now, you didn't start your shift till 2:30, but between yourself being there training and then setting up the facility and whatnot.
Well, the difference with you is when I was there in the summer, there was probably like 10 of us. When you were there in the fall, I think it was pretty much you.
It was just me. It actually started with 3 of us, and 2 of them dropped out.
Yeah.
And I got, surely listen, where was I going? I'd flown, it was my first time ever away from Ireland. I'd flown however far Boston is from Ireland. Like, I wasn't going anywhere. So obviously I had to stay, but I wouldn't change it for the world either. It was a great experience. Did you also intern at Cressy's?
No, I just had spent the whole time over there whenever, like, I remember we kind of tried to do like an intern field trip
Yeah.
over
Because
there.
Dave Rack interned there.
He did intern there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually grew up right down the street from there. So like that's actually where I'm from, the Massachusetts, like maybe 10 minutes down the road
From
his.
from Hudson.
Yep. Yeah.
Because Cressy's this is a pure Irish saying, but Cressy's Hudson facility in Massachusetts is in the arsehole of nowhere.
That's where I'm from, the arsehole of nowhere.
I love it. Come here, before we move on into your influences and then into the topics for today's podcast, and the topics I really want to cover today is definitely exercise and cognitive health. It's a massive area that I'm getting into, and I know it's a huge area that you've really looked into because you're going around presenting on that. And then also lately you're starting to get into this return to play, or what we were just talking about offline, which is really return to performance is what we really want. Before we get into that though, just when you were growing up, what sports did you play?
I played football, and then I did track and field. So I played
track. What you do in track? I never knew that.
I did everything. I did the decathlon. So I was mainly a discus thrower, a bigger guy, but then I got into decathlon. I did decathlon 2 years. I didn't do track until my junior year of high school. So I played baseball and I got bored standing around in the field doing nothing. So then I got into track and field, and I realized the reason I really got into track and field because they would let me lift weights and then sprint and throw, and like, so practice was kind of like working out, except I had to throw some stuff, and that would help me with football, right? So I got into that, and it was enjoyable. I'm really happy that I had that experience. Actually, it was I had no idea about track and field until my junior year of high school, but it was a pretty good experience. I thought it was a pretty successful career. So,
what position of football?
Outside linebacker.
Nice.
Yes.
Any back concussions?
Bad concussions and shoulder surgery. I got a labral repair. So yeah, that's actually why I really got into lifting weights, because sophomore year of high school, I had a shoulder injury. And then football, like after I got a surgery and went to rehab, they would say like I could go do non-contact drills, but I couldn't do contact drills yet. So when they were doing contact drills, I would just go to the weight room and lift. Right. Yeah. So then I started to build a habit that way. So that's kind of what got me into strength and conditioning. Like a lot of people, like you suffer an injury, you rehab, and you get into that process. So, I guess I should be thankful for that.
And tell us about the powerlifting career you had at one stage. You were a pretty decent powerlifter.
Yeah, Steve Bunker, I credit him, and Brendan Rearick for getting me into that. So, you go through the evolution of strength coach. Like Mike is very right when he says there's an evolution of a strength coach. So, you start as like a bodybuilder, like you do, like you're doing like bodybuilding sets using these machines. And I started at Gold's Gym, right? Then when I went into college, I met Brendan Rearick my freshman year of college. And we became friends real quick, and he was already into powerlifting and Olympic lifting and these things. So he kind of got me into powerlifting. He took me to my first powerlifting meet ever at some basement gym in PBD. They put it on themselves. Definitely wasn't like an AAU meet or anything like that. And then when I got to MBSC, Steve Bunker zeroed in on me and started having me lift with him. So I probably did 7 meets, I think, between Brendan and Steve Bunker, and I would just push pull meets. But that was a great experience. I was saying there that he really taught me a lot about lifting weights in that early time at MBSC, and I'm thankful for that for sure. Got me really strong.
I remember when I went over for my internship in 2009, like in my mind, I was like, well, I won't see any squatting or, deadlifting, or I won't see any of that stuff here when I go. Cause I didn't know who Steve was at the time, and Jamie Smith also was working at Boyles at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So Jamie was very influenced at the time by Westside. And I actually, because I actually stayed with Steve the first day or two when I arrived. So I actually went to the old North Andover facility first before I went to the Winchester facility. And we drive up and there's no one there but Jamie, and he's training just before a group comes in, because now we're in the fall, like, so he's waiting for the high school kids to come in. And there he is, walking, and there's like I Hate My Mother music blaring, and there's this fella doing barbell tricep extensions with chains. Do you know, with chains, accommodating resistance and all this. And it was so fun. And Steve was like, oh yeah, and Steve's like, I powerlift and all this, and I was like, oh, I didn't think anyone who would work at Boyles would powerlift.
Get the board presses. He had it all up there.
And I was telling Jamie, I'd love to go to Westside and meet Louis, like, and I won't tell you what he said. I'll say it to you offline, because just in case Jamie hears this, he'll probably go, probably should have said that online. But it was very funny. But it was just funny, that my immediate thought was like, I won't see any, I definitely won't see any Westside. And the first thing I walked in, there was bench press with chains going on and tricep dumbbell rollback extensions, and it was hilarious.
The Steve Bunker School of Strength up there.
Oh, exactly. Listen, fucking people were strong, man. He was strong, but Bunky was 10 years ago. Bunky's still strong, obviously. Let's just say, for the listeners, if you don't know who Steve Bunker is, he's I don't want to say Bunky's age, but he's middle-aged now, but he still isn't a person you'd want to meet in a dark lane in a bad humor. Do you know what I mean? Even though he's the nicest human being in the world, he'd never do that. But I'm saying, the dude's strong. Before again we start, why did you pick exercise science as your degree?
Well, I was interested. After I hurt my shoulder in high school, I got interested. I was like, maybe I want to do physical therapy. I had a really positive physical therapy experience, and sometimes you're thinking people have bad ones, right? I remember this guy being really good and encouraging me to lift and having me lift when I was in rehab. So that kind of got me interested. And then at the same time, I kind of developed this love of lifting weights because of that. So I remember being I might go to school for physical therapy. I had two broad interests. I was going to go to school for photography or physical therapy. And because my dad's a professional photographer, my grandfather was a professional photographer.
A radiologist, that's what you should have became there.
Right there. Throw that in.
Yeah.
And so I was I applied to schools for both of those. And then I decided eventually to go to school for kinesiology at UMass Amherst. And through that process, I still didn't know, am I going to do physical therapy? Am I going to do athletic training? I took all these kind of tracks, and then I discovered MBSC my freshman year. I still always tell the story. This guy, Clark Evans at Gold's Gym, he was a private contractor, and he was doing single leg deadlifts and single leg squats. And actually, you know what I saw him doing? Remember the Russian plate circuit we used to do?
Yeah.
He was doing that in the gym, and I was on the pec deck and on the leg extension machine at 18. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? So he had me work out with him, and he thrashed me. I had never done anything like that. And he was like, I just did this mentorship with this guy, Mike Boyle at BU. You should look into him. I think he does internships. And I just started college, and then I applied, and the rest was history. I didn't really know as much about strength and conditioning. I was reading, I read Men's Health and Muscle and Fitness. I didn't really know anything outside of that until I went to MBSC, and that's where I kind of got my 101. So that's what pulled me in. Other than that, I probably would have gone to PT school or gone to be an AT or something.
Man, we were all there. Listen,
yeah.
I did. As much as I hate to admit it, I did squats in the Smith machine as well.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
The old co-hanger, or as I call it, the inverted row machine. Oh, that one.
Yeah, the big inverted row machine.
That's all it's good for. Inverted rows and what do you call it? Regression push-ups. We'll just on the Smith machine there. Just move the bar. Clink, clink. Ah, very good. Come here. Obviously, I know who's one person you're going to mention here, but I'm still going to ask the question. In terms of your biggest influences, professionally and personally, gives a few names there, or, well, if there's only one person, but I imagine that there's been a lot of people.
I always say, I can't overstate how valuable the people at MBSC were when I first started. And there are a lot of people that, some people might not know, or some people might know, but I think about, the staff that was there when I showed up, and it was obviously Mike, but there was Jamie Rodriguez, there was Nicole Rodriguez, it was Josh Bonatall, it was Dan Gableman, it was Devin McConnell. And now I think, and then list these people off, I'm like Jamie's in professional hockey, Josh was in college and professional basketball, and now is out in San Francisco with Future, and Nicole, obviously with Exos and all over the world, and Dan with Union, and Devin at UMass Lowell. And these people, when I showed up, I was like, this was my Mount Rushmore when I was first started. So for me, they really taught me a lot about coaching. Kyle Holland obviously was huge for me as well. And now with Exos. So as far as how I coach and how I run groups and how I communicate with athletes, it's definitely that group of people who really have influenced kind of how I communicate. And then you think about the entire field of strength conditioning and all the people who are out there, like Dan John has been very helpful to me. Charlie Weingroff has been very helpful to me, people who I look up to. So, but I always like to think about the people who were at MBSC when I started, who really taught me a lot, like Steve Bunker or Garnet Vamos, who were all there. And I say I wouldn't have the communication skills or the coaching skills I have if it weren't for those people.
Yeah, I never got the chance to actually meet Garnet, but I heard stories about it. But without question, I was heavily influenced by that original group too. So like Nicole obviously was a huge influence on me because she basically was my boss when I interned. Kyle was there, Jamie was there. Jamie was great. He's such a funny bloke. Anthony was there, Miranda, he's hilarious too.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was gas. I'll never forget my first like staff meeting at Boyles. This is so funny because I've told Breck and Church this story too, but we were sitting down, and this is when Breck and Church had just come on the scene, and Mike had just come back from Long Beach, and he goes, "You'll never like." I was at Long Beach, and this guy just kept coming up to me, talking to me about glutes, and he's like, he was like, and he was after me and Cosgrove, and he kept saying he'd written this book all about glutes and like this hip lift extra, hip thrust or something. And he was kind of freaking me out a little bit. And then, like, as my internship went on through September and October, he was writing for T Nation, and like he's becoming huge. Like Brett was becoming huge, and he was on strengthcoach.com, and Mike was like, "That's who that guy was." It's like literally in my first staff meeting, they were like, "Well, how's Long Beach?" And he goes, "Well, let me tell you."
Hey, it's a story about being relentless, right? You gotta distract the people down, and then that worked out for him for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And when I was telling Brett that story, he goes, "Yeah, that's pretty much what I did." Like he made a presentation. I went up and was like, "Come here, I want to talk to you about glutes and the book I wrote in DMG and la la la." So, exactly. So let's get into our main topic today. So, you for the last while, that I can see anyway, because you have some presentations up that are on Body by Boyle online. Um, you seem to have this big interest in. It's not just you. I'm into too, about exercise and its ability to enhance cognitive health and longevity. And probably as well, it's probably so much more in the mainstream now, just in terms of longevity, because longevity is huge. You go everywhere, like it's on Joe Rogan. This guy,
Hmm.
David St. Clair, he's talking about aging. Peter Attia is big into anti-aging. So like there's a lot of people out there in that space. Rhonda Patrick she did a lot of work with
Yeah, she's outstanding.
Walter Longo. Oh yeah, her stuff's amazing. So like it's becoming more sort of TOMA, if you will, top of mind awareness, that people are kind of getting
Hmm.
into this concept of anti-aging and longevity. And obviously, then if anyone's read the work of Harari, it's Sapiens, and particularly with Deos, where he speaks about probably the next sort of venture for humans is to increase our lifespan and almost become to the point where like we can defeat death bar an accident. But tell us what got you into exercise as medicine, as a medicinal sort of resource, and what got you into this whole field of exercise and cognitive health and well-being. Just take
Yeah,
us down a whole avenue, and what have you like learned and discovered and implemented with all your research?
yeah. Well, it's even funny. The name Movement is Medicine as our business was because Brendan and I had this professor in college named Barry Braun, and he had written an article, and that was like the tagline of it. And this guy was a great professor. He was like our kinesiology 101. Like he taught a bunch of great classes at UMass. And so we were influenced by that name. We said, we're going to use that for our business. Right. And then it was something we really believed in, like using it as medicine. Getting the reason we named our rehab in businesses as that is because we wanted to get people back to exercising and like, so that they could access that. Right. And then in my time at MBSC, I mean, I love working with the athletes, but then I started to really like 50% of my time is with general population. And I was seeing how exercise was changing their lives, not just like helping them lose weight, but like their quality of their overall health and long-term resiliency and things like that. So I started to really, research and look more into that. And so I did this presentation a few years ago called Movement is Medicine. It was kind of like a broad spectrum presentation about how exercise changes your long-term health and resiliency. And in that process, I started to really get interested in the cognitive health aspect because at that point you didn't hear as much about it. Or at least I didn't know much about it. Right. So
Mm.
all the research showing how, aerobic exercise helps actually add brain mass, or how strength training helps people maintain like white matter and improve executive function over time. I started to see all this research and I said, this is fascinating. And kind of concurrently also, my grandfather was suffering from vascular dementia. And he passed away from vascular dementia a couple of years ago. And I mean, it's tough because when someone has a disease like that, they're not really the same person you grew up with or the same person you knew over time. So it's a pretty devastating disease if you've ever been around somebody or had someone in your family who suffered from Alzheimer's dementia or something like that. And then you start to read the research, you realize like everyone can name a cancer survivor. Nobody can name an Alzheimer's survivor, right? we talk about like things like heart disease or cancer and all these things as major killers, we're actually putting a dent into those diseases. While things like dementia and Alzheimer's are the fastest growing diseases in the world.
Yeah.
And that's not just because people are living longer. It's actually because there's a higher incidence of it. It's up like it's growing at like 89% per year was, I think, the stat, right? And so for me, I said, we kind of became obsessed. Like, this is a lifestyle disease. This wasn't a disease that existed 100 years ago. And it's, when you look at it, whenever doctors try to, say, oh, we have a cure for this, or we have a pill for this. Well, you can't prescribe a pill for something that you've been developing inside your body due to lifestyle for years and years and years. Like there's no monotherapy for that. It's a lifestyle intervention. So I became really interested in looking at the research about dementia. And then that also led me to the research about exercise as it relates to things like depression and anxiety, because if you think about another disease or a lifestyle issue that's kind of taken over our society, like depression is the number one reason for disability worldwide. And you see how exercise drastically affects people's mood and drastically affects people's psychological states. So for me, that became really interesting because it's just not talked about, and we don't really market it, right? Like, we market fat loss, we market performance, but like, how often do you like market how exercise affects people's cognitive health to get people in the gym? Because some people don't identify by their physicality, they identify by their cognitive traits, right? So it became really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, I suppose the reason for that is you can't see a tangible change. With cognitive health, it's not like you can open up your school and say, "Oh, look at my brain! Look how much better it looks."
Yeah.
But like probably in the future there will be there probably will be, and there probably will. I mean, if you were to tell someone about like smartphones 20 years ago, they probably would thought you were out of your mind. But there probably will be facilities in the future where they'll be like, they'll scan your brain, at the day of your assessment, and then 12 weeks later, just like we do with fat loss, taking body fat, it'll be like, look at your brain now. Look
Yep.
at the scan show. See those black dots? They're all gone because you fill that in now with new neurons or whatever else. You know what I mean? Or there's been some neurogenesis there, or neuroplasticity, or just basically there'll be a way to tell that your brain is more healthier and robust and whatnot. But yeah,
Well, absolutely, man. Like, the reason some of this science is advanced is because they got like functional MRI and they could start to actually see changes in brain mass. And like right now, I think the best way to do it, you listen to this, Dale Bredesen wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's, and he talks about like, until you can do that, you kind of get what you call a cognoscopy instead of colonoscopy, right? And you look at all the factors that affect brain health. So you get blood testing, you look at things like inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, you look at testosterone, sex hormones, vitamin D levels, all these things that help brain health. And right now, like, that's kind of what we should be doing, right? Like, look at those numbers, go and train, do lifestyle interventions, go look at those numbers again. But I think at some point, you're right, it'll eventually be actual imaging. Like, you put your head in a machine and you go in the gym, and then they look at it, and then you come back and you test it 12 weeks later, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, it'll be kind of nearly like what HRV is now, like, in a way too, and that you can, because that's what Joel Jameson kind of, like, his whole thing is like, in terms of like his Morpheus product that he has out, and like a lot of people think, that this is only for elite athletes, and you're like, no, it's not. It's like, you can utilize this with your general population and corporate clients as well, because their whole thing is longevity and cognitive abilities. Like, so you can market it and sell and say, listen, I'm adding years here to your life, and not only am I adding years, but I'm adding quality years too. And like, you can show that through things like a HRV reading, to a degree. Now, obviously, people listen to this and be like, listen, there's a lot more to it than that. But you get what I mean, that it'll probably get to a degree where we want to be able to measure the health status of the brain too. You mentioned that neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and then also depression are on the rise. From the research you've done and the reading you've done, and even just from your own thinking about these issues, why do you think they've increased so much in the last century?
I think it's a lot of things. Like, one, there is the fact that people are living longer, so you're just seeing more incidents, but that doesn't seem, based on the research, to be why you've seen a large spike. But I mean, lifestyle issues, like, these are diseases that are primarily inflammatory diseases when you look at all the factors that weigh into them, right? So you see things like depression and diabetes occur twice as often together as they do by themselves, right? And you see things like Alzheimer's. It's clearly, they call it type 3 diabetes with dementia when you look at the research. So these are inflammatory conditions. So you think like people, less quality sleep, more stress, right? They're not managing stress. We talk about mindfulness and HRV and things like that. being able to take your stress down, inactivity that causes rise in inflammation and things like that. I think it's an overall lifestyle issue. And the problem is, again, I go back to Dale Bredesen, who's a large influence of mine in this topic. He says it's 36 holes in the roof, right? When you look at all the factors that go to something like dementia, when they can draw a line between 36 different things that drive that disorder, you can't just plug one, right? And that's the problem with modern medicine, is they want to plug one. They want to give you one pill, or they want to have one cure, but it's too complicated of an answer, right? Because there is a genetic component, there's a sleep component, there's an exercise component, there's a nutrition component, there's all these things. And it's not an easy answer to give someone, but it's definitely a result of our modern lifestyle, as opposed to purely a like genetic or bad luck, the fact that you get one of these disorders, right?
Tell me about how this research influences your work now with your clients. And also too, so let's just say you've got your clients coming in. So we'll leave athletes aside for now, because they're more so utilizing S&C, as a means to an end for sports performance. And obviously there's going to be other benefits to cognitive health. But I suppose just like with the adult programs at Boyles and stuff like that, you're getting these people in, and they want to lose some fat, they want to feel better, get out of pain's a big one, as we know, because you deal a lot with people in pain. But when you have these clients now, do you say to them like in that first consultation about, listen, there's also going to be benefits here for your health or your brain, or is that just something you keep in your own mind and know through the training process, listen, while I help Susan, or while I help Brian, or will I help Tom, or will I help Mary, as we always say here, it's always Mary over here, while I help them, with their body composition goals, or their bad knee, take that back, with their painful knee, or their painful hip.
No civic language.
Yeah, exactly. But with any sort of issues with pain that they have, I also know that I'm going to help them cognitively as well as this longevity piece. Do you have that conversation now with them, or do you just say, like they come in, let's say, oh, it's just body composition, or it's just a knee issue, you just address that, but in your mind you're like, and this is also going to help you cognitively? Like,
I think
you sell the cognitive piece is basically what I'm saying too.
Yeah, I think you have to share that. Most of it is how you provide education about everything else they do outside of the gym, right? The good thing is we're doing a lot of the things in training that are valuable for your brain, as they're valuable for your body, as they're valuable for everything, right?
Without even knowing.
Yeah, and it's definitely influenced me to program more things that I think are helpful. I've definitely put a larger value on cardiac output work, and also the type of cardiac output work they do on their own. Things that challenge the brain to get people to cross the midline. I'm definitely programming more things that make the people stop and have to understand something, like ladder drills, or skipping, or shuffling, or sideways crawling, those types of things, into warm-up drills especially. It made me value the warm-up a lot more. I've always valued warm-ups as it relates to athletes, right? We think about the old Mark Verstegen, from Core Performance. What are the 3 core things for a warm-up? Increase body temperature, wake up the central nervous system, rehearse patterns for upcoming training session or competition, right? That's the 3 tenets. But then I start to think this is such a valuable component to work on these kind of lower intensity skills that challenge the brain, especially for general population, right? The old warm-up was hey, go on a bike or a treadmill for 5 minutes. What a waste of the time for all, a time that I could challenge their corpus callosum, or challenge their brain to fire a little bit better, coordinate right side, left side, because you see all these people as they get older that lose that ability. So it definitely helped influence my programming. But as going back to what you said, a lot of it influences how I educate and how much I really value the other 23 hours of the day with them. And thinking if I'm really going to be a healthcare practitioner, if I really am going to say I'm more than just Joe Schmo, the personal trainer, I'm going to think about all these other factors, not just the 1 hour you're with me. So starting to think about progressive education about sleep hygiene, how you manage stress and mindfulness. That's been probably the biggest thing. Okay, are you working towards something purposeful outside of here? Do you have other goals that you care about? Are there, how do you manage stress and anxiety? What is your technique for that? And starting to educate about those things. And every client that comes to you is going to be a different point on the spectrum. Some people are ready for that conversation, and some people have never even had that conversation on their radar, especially going to a personal trainer. They're just thinking yeah, this guy's going to help me lift. But then you have to kind of progressively educate about why these things matter for their overall health. And usually the people who kind of buy into the overall health idea are the ones that stick around, right? They see that like you value those things. And then if there's people who maybe are not in that, they maybe drift off, right? So I think sometimes now we just kind of find the clients that fit us at MBSC who kind of buy into that whole idea, you know?
Well, yeah, I love that answer, and I'd like you to expand on some of the pieces you spoke about there. So you said that you're starting to put more of a, I wouldn't say reliance. What was the word I'd say? You started to kind of see the value. You started to put more value into areas like cardiac output work, crossing the midline. Could you maybe just speak on, like, why that is the case?
Mm-hmm.
What's the rationale for that? And just something I want to say before you answer that too. I think because exercise doesn't come like in a little prescription bottle, that people, and when I say, and actually I'll even take away people there, that coaches don't actually realize that they are dispensing like extremely potent medicine. And of course, as we know with medicine, it can be medicine or it can be poison, depending on how you prescribe that dosage for that particular individual. So again, what could be medicine for one individual could be poison for someone else. So what I'm trying to get across before I let you answer what I just asked you there is that I think we need to start seeing what we dispense as our medicine as coaches, which is movement and exercise, as something that is extremely potent, because I just don't think we put that value on it. Like, we are putting a serious input into an organism, and we need to become very shrewd with our prescriptions. And I know that's something that you share, but just why have you got more spec now for things like cardiac output work? What's the reason? And crossing the midline, and what else, if anything else comes to mind, and what were the resources that influenced that?
Well, yeah, like going back to what you just said there, like exercise is a poly pill. Like when I did the movement as medicine, yeah, it's a good one, right?
Like that.
I stole that from somewhere. I don't remember where. But it's when I gave the movement as medicine presentation, I kept being like, the whole thing was like, exercise is really good for you and it's really valuable. But I'm like, it's more valuable and powerful than you realize. Like, everybody knows it's good. But like you said, the dosage really matters, just like any other medicine. And who gets what really matters. And that's why we're passionate about this as educators and people who care about fitness. And we have this at our disposal. I think we are the front line of healthcare, especially if you do a really good job. And the reason I got really interested in cardiac output, one, when you look at the research, it seems to be one of the biggest benefits for cognitive health is like increased blood flow. And with the with the cardiac output, like, we just need to get a better pump. Like, we need to make the heart as a better pump to like push more blood through the system. And it seems that I think also that's what was most researched. When you look at the research, there's a lot of like low aerobic studies, like bike cycling or walking. And one of the largest impacts you can have on your cognitive health, it seems to be, is like just non-exercise physical activity. How many, like, goes back to sometimes I hate the idea of like, 10,000 steps, but it's the people who walk more and the people who do lower intensity aerobic activity tend to have better cognitive and function later in life. So I had these clients who would come see me, and I'm like, you see me 2 or 3 days a week, but like, what do you do outside of here? Like, I'm in the office.
Yeah.
When you look at the research, like, the people who exercise for 3 hours a week but don't do anything else, they don't have that much better health outcomes than people who don't exercise at all. So I was starting to think like, okay, I got to talk to my clients about like, okay, I need you to get in like a 20-minute walk every day. And like, that's not asking a lot, right? Let's just start there. But that stuff really adds up, one, for weight loss, but you look at blood pressure, you look at depression, you look at stress management, and executive function and overall brain health as people get older. And the people who just consistently walk every day, it's light years difference. So that started to get me to value these things and to encourage them to do these things outside the gym, and then really value, like, on their intake, like really going through, all right, resting heart rate, you need to have the MyZone so we can look at your heart rate every day, and then start to do, the Aerodyne bike and the Cooper's test is kind of like what I do for most people who come and see us as an assessment, because it's such an easy, low impact way to start to assess those things for the general population.
Kevin, is that the full 12-minute or is it modified 6?
Modified 6.
And sorry, this is just purely for me, but the listeners will get some. What are good times for that? Does it vary with age or?
So what I'll do is we get them on the assault bike or the Aerodyne at work, and we put up the heart rate monitor on them, And
Okay.
I'll give them the instruction of, I want you to go as far as you can in the next 6 minutes. Okay. But what I want you to do is, I don't want you to come out the gates and sprint and then crash, right? I want to see a steady max effort over the next 6 minutes. And what
Yeah.
I'm going to do is I'm going to track your heart rate, and I'm going to track your RPMs, and I'm going to get your max aerobic speed, which is going to be your average RPMs over that time. I'm going to get your average heart rate over that time, which is going to roughly correlate to your threshold, right? Give or take. And that's going to give me an idea of how much aerobic power you have. And it's going to give me a marker to predict your interval intensity over all of our interval work that we're going to do following that, right?
So you prescribe off, do you do the 15-15 off that?
I can do that off that. And then we have the chart, so it relates to things like 0.2s, 0.3s, and half
Brilliant.
miles.
Brilliant.
And then also, more importantly, in the minute following the test, I just say, sit right there. I'm going to track your 1 minute heart rate recovery. So I can see, okay, if you just finished that test at 180, I want to see the next minute, how much do you drop? And I'd like to see people drop at least 40 beats, at least in that minute, to see, okay, if your cardiac output is adequate, you're going to be able to drop 40 beats. I've seen some people that can't lower their heart rate in that minute following.
Yeah.
And then I also have their resting. So I have a pretty good idea of their basic kind of aerobic profile, at least on the bike, in that 6 minutes rather. And then I can start to prescribe things and figure out where they are. And that's been very, very helpful for us.
With that, I actually asked this on the Strength Coach forum, because it was originally Joel and Dave Tanney that I got this from, that they were saying that, roughly a good 1 minute recovery is 30 beats or more, if you can drop it by more than 30 beats. But I've tried to look for research on that, and it just doesn't seem to be. Is that just through observation on their end? And what have you seen? Because you've done this a lot.
Yeah, that's where that's the original number, and I got it from them, from like reading those forum posts and reading all their work. But now I'm seeing, like, I want more than that. I want definitely more than 30. I'm seeing like, I want to see 40 or more generally, just from my experience looking at all the people do the test. I'm seeing a lot of fit people, like I'll drop over 50 beats in the minute.
Just on that, I actually read a paper, and there was 3 groups, and the average was a 60 beat drop in the first minute.
Yeah. So
these were like fits, but not athletes. They were just fit, like regular people, but they were fit, like.
Yeah. So I want higher numbers than that. When I'm seeing someone around 30, they're generally people who need more cardiac output work, in my experience at least. And I want to see that their resting is, below 60. Like when they wake up, I want to see like a good resting. And when they walk into the gym, I want to see that they're not elevated all the time. So that's been really valuable for us. And we do the same test with the athletes to prescribe intervals. It's very easy. And we can get accurate interval intensities really easily from that.
Man, we could stay talking about like exercise and cognitive health for a long time. I know there was a great podcast with Kelly Brogan, MD. She's a medical doctor, and she's what you call it, not a psychologist, psychiatric. What's
psychiatrist?
Psychiatrist. So just that name escaped me. So she's a psychiatrist, but she apparently, like, she's completely poo-pooed by conventional medicine, because she just doesn't prescribe drugs. She's like all about like lifestyle intervention. But she was on Joe Rogan, and she was basically saying, like, if you went to the literature and took exercise's impact on mental health, and then took the literature about these drugs and their impact on mental health, she's like, exercise beats the living shit out of every drug ever invented for depression. And she's just like, but obviously Big Pharma or whoever else just don't want the average person to know that.
Can't sell that exercise, man. Can't sell it. Well, it's interesting, and I'm going to get back to you talking about crossing the midline and that stuff. But real quick, I was reading this research about depression and exercise, and comparing it to traditional like antidepressants, right? And through the whole research review at the end, they said for mild to moderate depression, that antidepressants have shown no difference than placebo, right? And but they would still recommend it for severe depression. When you read like John Rattay, who wrote Spark and wrote Go Wild,
great book.
He's a psychologist as well, or a psychiatrist rather, and he treats people clinically. And he said same thing, like he would still prescribe a lot of these things like SSRIs or whatever for people with severe depression, but for people to mild to moderate, there's so many negative side effects that come from that, whereas you can't list the negative side effects really of exercise as long as it's prescribed well. And when they looked at the really key numbers, like when you look at prescription drugs or any intervention, you have things like NNTs, which is numbers needed to treat. So the amount of people that need an intervention to get a positive outcome, versus NNH, which is numbers needed to harm. So the amount of people that might have a negative outcome for one person to have a positive outcome. And you compare things like antidepressant drugs and exercise, it's not even comparable. Like you could have, they said the number needed to treat for exercise for people to have a positive outcome versus depression, right? Was like 4 people would need to go on this exercise program for one person to have improved antidepressant results. Whereas with like an antidepressant, it was up to like 60 people would need the intervention for one person to get better. And then for number needed to harm, it was like upwards of 90 people might have negative side effects, right? So when you start to weigh those things out, you're like, well, why don't we just try exercise, right? We can always go and prescribe, and some people might need these interventions, but it's kind of a no-brainer.
Man, it's crazy.
No pun
Just
intended.
what a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. But it reminds me of a story too, just you talking about, prescribing the antidepressant pill purely because of its placebo effect. There was a great podcast with Jim Laird and Pat Davidson, and they got onto the topic about steroids. And Jim Laird said that this young kid came to him and says, Jim, like, I want to do steroids. I want to do steroids. And Jim like openly admits, he's like, I powerlifted, I did steroids, and he says, so I'll always guide anyone that wants to, ask about it. So he says to this young kid, he goes, listen, I can't get them for you, I can't get involved with that. And then, like, as he kind of told the kid he couldn't do, he thought about it, and he says, if I don't help him here, he's going to go somewhere else and get something dodgy. So he went back to the kid, right, and he goes, yeah, listen, I'll sort you out. So what Jim does is he gets these sugar pills down at Koger's or something. Anyway, he gets them Koger's, as we said, but whatever they were sweets or sugar, or I don't know, whatever, but they weren't drugs. But he gives them to the kid, and then as he gives them to the kid, he says, now these steroids won't work if you don't do the following. You need to eat more food, like a lot more, particularly meat and like good starches like rices and sweet potatoes. And you probably want to do that about 4 to 6 times a day, good meals. You need to sleep a lot. Like, I'm talking 7 to 9 hours now. Like, so otherwise these won't work. These pills won't work. You need to drink water, and you also need to train really hard, like 3-4 sessions a week, real hard. Do that. Take these pills every day. Just one will do for the next 8 weeks, and come back to me. I'm sure the kid comes back in 8 weeks or whatever, it might be 12 weeks, and he's like, dude, I need more of those pills. I'm an animal, like, and all this going up. And then Jim was just like, man, they were sugar pills.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what I mean? So it's just amazing. But you got to touch in there on crossing the midline. Just quickly before you do that, Kev, just currently where I'm at in terms of my study too, I'm studying a ton of physiology. And I really looked at the brain and, the structure of the brain, nervous system. And it's funny, like, I did a lot of skill acquisition study last year because I had to do part of my master's. And what I've kind of linked together is, so if you read up on like how we take in sensory information, so when it goes to what's called your somatosensory area, which is just, so there's an area in your brain called your central gyrus, or your central sulcus, some people might call it too, but there's a thing called your post central gyrus, which is where your somatosensory center is, and that's where you take in that information and it gets integrated. And then in front of the central sulcus then is your primary somatic motor center, and then from that's the premotor. But the reason I'm bringing all that up is that when you take in information into those areas of the cortex, they will interpret that against not only what's coming in at that time, but they'll also weigh that against previous experiences that your body has had. So then this is evidence, or you could say this is evidence to claim why early sport specialization is not good. So a broad general base of movement literacy is very good. But then in terms of just cognitive health, the well-being of the cortex, that we want to expose people to as much movement variability as possible. And then there's that word again, variability. And over the last decade, variability has been like this huge word in strength conditioning between heart rate variability and movement variability. And the more variable an organism is, the more robust it seems to be in terms of an organism that's able to adapt to its environment. And an organism that's has more adaptability is going to be more robust and like live longer and pass on its genes better, for looking at an evolution thing. So when I started reading more in physiology, and then like things like skill acquisition. So your skill acquisition, you have these emergent movement properties. Like, you're always, every movement you make is a solution to what's emerging right in front of you. So to have more of a bank of, movement memory, if you like, to call upon. You'll have more keys, open more locks to solve more movement issues, and that surely cannot be anything but a good thing, you know. So you get into more of what you think movement's doing there with the brain, the nervous system, and like this cross in the midline, which I want you to speak on to.
Well, like you said, like the more keys to open more locks, and you think about most people, like general population who come into the gym, they have like one key for one lock, and we want to slowly open that up, right? And it might start with, you know, basic things like, hey, sagittal plane competency. How can you connect your rib cage and your pelvis and understand where your body is in space? But then you think about most people live in a nice, neat little box their whole life. They get out of bed, they sit in their chair, they go straight, they go forward, they don't go backwards, they don't go sideways, they don't rotate. But then when life asks them to do those things, they don't have the key to that lock. And that's when people get hurt. That's when people start to become more disabled, right? Because usually as you get older, like, I can't do that anymore is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When they say, oh, I'm too old, right? And they stop exploring their environment around them. That's the downhill slope starts right there. And when you look at the people who stay active late into life, they keep exploring the environment around them. And we want to continue to expand them and expand that and show them as much as they can, because one, activities of daily living become easier. The way you move around becomes easier, but that also lights up your brain. Like when someone crosses the midline or rotates and has to coordinate right side, left side, and cross crawling and skipping, like that lights your brain up. And the book that really opened my eyes to this was Smart Moves by Carla Hannaford.
Yeah.
And that book was like, it's one of those, I have rereads, like certain books I'll reread every year. And that's one of them that I'm like, I got to read that book again, because it reminds me of things that I need to do better. And they talk a lot about cross crawling, right? I mean, take anyone in the gym and start to teach them how to skip. How many of the general population will go same arm, same leg? How many people will not know how to crawl?
The Frankensteins.
Yeah, this thing, right? And that's because most people lose that connection. Their brain doesn't work the way it used to. And your brain is truly a use it or lose it thing, just like mobility is. So starting to be like, okay, can we rotate our hips opposite of our shoulders? Can we move our opposite arm and leg in coordinating patterns? And so it's influenced me to put these things and really value some of these things that we thought were just athletic qualities. Well, that put those in for general population, right? Things like beam walking, having to hold a weight in one hand and then having to coordinate walking across a beam, because it demands mindfulness and attention, right? Like I put up these videos of like those orange beams we use, and in between like a set of squats, their active rest is like, go walk across the beam down and back with a sandbag. And you should see someone who's never done that before. It's like you step on the beam and they fall off. So not only do you get the balance and stability aspects, but you can't think about like the stress of your job or what you have to do after when you're trying to walk across that. It demands your mindfulness, right? And that's another thing we're trying to train. So the more you can work some of these, like you said, the buzzword variability, or even just movement skill mastery. Like, can you squat with a weight on the right versus squat with a weight on the left? Can you shuffle sideways? Can you do a karaoke? Can you backpedal? Like in work, all these dynamic movements in, like Charlie Weingraf has the word, like he always talked about joint centration, right? I like the idea of like movement centration, like from a gross movement standpoint. Like, can this person go forward, backwards, sideways, but progress it in a thoughtful way? Like, sometimes you see these kind of schools of movement thought where it's like, okay, I'm gonna have these people move all dynamically, but you have to get these basic competencies first, right? Like teach them to squat, teach them to have sagittal plane control, teach them to hinge, but then start to feed in these dynamic things once they start to show some mastery. And I think long term, you're giving people, you said, more keys to more locks.
So what I'd like to ask you here is, in terms of giving the listeners something tangible to go away with. Mm-hmm. So if I said to you, Kevin Carr, even though this isn't going to be ideal, because everyone really is an N of one, they're their own sort of little experiment in terms of how they're going to respond to every stimulus. If you were to give general guidelines out there to the population to help them optimize health and longevity, mm-hmm. what would be some of the big rocks you'd like to advise? And I know, listen, and by the way, before any of the listeners can maybe roll their eyes and go, well, sure, that's out there already. ACSM have their guidelines, and there's some governments, but like, I'd like to hear from the background you're coming from, particularly with this sort of, I don't want to say bias, because it's obviously not the only thing you consider, but this, with the knowledge of what we just spoke about over the last almost an hour now in terms of exercise and cognitive function. But someone's coming to you, someone's coming to you and saying, listen, for the general population, for the people out there who just want health, longevity, and to be as cognitively able as possible to their last day, what would those recommendations look like across the lifespan?
Awesome. Yeah. So number one, make sure your aerobic health is up to par. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. So is your resting heart rate below 60 every day when you wake up? Like, that's a good management of stress, but also your basic aerobic health. Like, do a modified Cooper's test, do consistent interval work on the bike or sprinting every week. That's going to like improve overall blood perfusion and blood flow, like aerobic health, I think, right off the bat. Obviously consistent strength training, things that we know, but there's so much evidence to show people who consistently lift weights maintain executive function and memory and things longer than people who don't. And also resistance training, when you look at the research there, they said people who did 12 weeks of resistance training showed improvement in depression symptoms, even if they didn't get stronger, right? So I say, like, most people listening to this are probably good enough to actually get people stronger in 12 weeks. The people in the research study were not these researchers, but they looked at it and they said people didn't even get stronger over 12 weeks, but their depression symptoms got better. So just consistently lift weights. And like we always say, consistency is more important than intensity or anything else. Yeah. Just show up and consistently lift a couple times a week, because that's what the research goes to show. Sleep hygiene, man. Like, and I know sleep's really popular. Those people who've read the Matthew Walker book, like Why We Sleep, unbelievable.
What an accent too. His voice.
Oh God, great.
His voice alone just sells it all.
Yeah.
Like, you had me at why, Matthew.
Learn to develop a sleep hygiene routine. That has been the biggest change for me in the last year personally. That I use the Oura Ring, so I was looking at the data, and okay, shut off the computer an hour before bed. Wear blue blockers if you're going to be in front of the computer. I don't care if they look goofy. They make clear ones now, actually, but I have the orange ones like you. Yeah, I don't care. My girlfriend thinks I'm crazy. Like, set your temperature in your room so it drops down into like the mid 60s when you go to sleep at night. Okay. All these simple little behaviors, you get these little marginal gains, like sleep hygiene. If you're going to work with your clients, take the time to go over sleep hygiene. That seems to be massively important. And then as far as like some of the dynamic stuff, do one thing every day that challenges you in the workout to have to learn how to move. And it doesn't have to be crazy. Like, I don't think you have to do these, like, all these crazy movements, but like challenge a ladder drill, crawling, skipping, do something every day that challenges you neurologically to stay sharp. And you're going to continue to challenge your brain to grow. Right. And then outside of the gym, again, continue to challenge your brain, like go pick up a skill, like go learn, take a class. Like, I think about my adults who are really active and really sharp as they get older. Like, I have a couple that's like learning Italian. They're in their mid 70s, learning to paint. They're in their mid 70s. Like, find one activity that stimulates you outside of what you normally do. And that's still healthcare. I think as a trainer, you should encourage that stuff out of your clients and out of yourself to keep yourself sharp. And then stress management. So if I want to do those like 5 things, like take 10 minutes of deep breathing and mindfulness. Like, there's like meditation. I think I heard Mark Fisher say is like steroids for the brain. It really is. So do you have a mindfulness practice? I don't think you have to be like, we think about meditation like you have to be a hippie in the woods or something like that. Like, you don't have to be that way. I think mindfulness is really important for everybody. So start to build some sort of meditation practice. If you start with something like Headspace or some one of those apps that get you to build a routine, I think that's really valuable.
Man, I've tons of other questions here I feel like I could ask, but I definitely, if you, I know you're a busy guy and you're always traveling, so we definitely need to sit down virtually again and have more conversations.
I'm coming back to Ireland. I got to get back to Ireland. That's the real answer to this, is I got to get back over there.
Well, listen, I got to get back over to the States. Actually, there's something actually I'll be sending a group email about, but that I'll ask you about online. That I want to do. You're a guy who does a ton of traveling, and we're after talking an awful lot about health and longevity, and travel really is, it can be brutal on your health. Like, obviously not only from the transient standpoint of acute things like jet lag and whatnot, but if you're doing it over the span of years, it can really accumulate and wear you down. And
Mm-hmm.
you've done a ton of traveling over the last few years with the certified functional strength coach. And the only reason I keep saying it out fully is I know I'll fuck up the acronym.
Yeah.
The CFSC. Did I get that right?
Bob still speaks out the
Certified
acronym.
Functional
He
Strength
owns the
Coach.
business, so
CFSC. It's just there's so many acronyms out there nowadays. You know what I mean?
it's hard.
When I was interviewing Lee Burton, I was like, FMS, that's his man. And what's that new one again?
FCS. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
like a million. Yes.
And like he was like, he's like, Robbie, I've lost it as well. So I just only treated
Alphabet
me.
soup, man.
Yeah, alphabet soup, exactly. But so my question is for you: what strategies do you put in place to mitigate the detrimental impacts of all the travel you do?
Yeah, the biggest, I've developed a jet lag routine, because like when you change time zones, it can crush you. So you need to I always pack zinc, uh, magnesium, like things that are going to help me get into a regular sleep cycle. Sometimes if it's a really big time change, I'll use the melatonin. I fast when I travel. There's a lot of research to show fasting, how it affects circadian rhythm. So for me, no one wants to eat airplane food anyways. So
it's pony.
Yeah, it's pony. There's the word. That's a great usage. But they always look at you like you're crazy. They're like, "You sure you don't want this meal? You're sure you don't?" I'm like, "Yes, I don't want to eat that microwave, like nasty crap that you're about to give me. I'll just wait 8 hours and I'll just eat something normal when I get there." But I tend to find if I fast through travel, maybe that's placebo. I feel better if I don't eat, and then when I get there, I try to get out in the sun immediately. I don't care if it's warm or cold. Like I'll go take a walk because that'll help the circadian rhythm, and then work out, and I'll maybe take a short nap if I need it. And all of that stuff has seemed to help. Like if I do that and I'm consistent, drink water, don't drink before you get on the plane. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, you have some beers, you pass out." No, you sleep terribly on the plane when you do that.
Yeah.
So I find I can sleep on the plane, and I think it's worth it to pay for an upgrade. If you're going to travel, I remember Dan John saying to me very early when I started traveling, he said, "If you're going to do this for a long time, use the points, or start to pay for upgrades when you can, because it'll change the quality of your life," and it definitely does.
Yeah,
So,
I can remember. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so that like those things, like making sure I take the supplements I need, I fast, I drink water, I get out in the sun, like those things can help regulate the travel experience. It's part of the problems with travel, other than changing the time zones, is people lose routines. So like you have to plan for it, like you plan for anything else, right? So if you don't like say, okay, I'm going to go here and work out. Like I have a gym in every country. The nice thing about CFSC is I go and I teach at gyms, right? So you can start to keep these things regular. And if people don't plan, and that's something I do with my clients, it's like, okay, what are we going to plan for when you're gone for the next week? Because it's not just me giving you a workout to do in the hotel. It's about like all the other lifestyle things that you should think about if you're going to be out of your normal location and out of your routines.
Yeah, I remember Mike, Coach Boyle for listeners. I remember Mike saying to me that he would prefer to travel and ask for business class than travel like economy and get paid to do the seminar. Like he'd rather like at the payment say, "Listen, if you fly me first class, I'll go over and talk for nothing." Like,
yeah,
almost. Because he put value on being able to get sleep. For me personally, it's definitely sunlight, my meal timings, and I fast as well. Yeah, so it's because meal timing is a massive circadian regulator. So that they're talking awful about these peripheral circadian clocks, and meal timing is huge. But light is massive. When I was at IFAST last year. Bill Hartman invited me over to the intensive, which was phenomenal, and I had no jet lag there or no jet lag back. Now I was a little bit tired when I came back, but I purely put down to like it was the best travel I'd done in terms of like just light exposures. Like I had my blue blocking light glasses on when it was say like still daytime in certain places, where because I was regulating my clock to Indianapolis time when I went, and then I started re-regulating it to Dublin time. So I was timing my meal. So like I would eat a meal and say, right, like this is like breakfast time in Indianapolis now, and then on my way back I was like, it's breakfast time in Dublin now. So I was purely re-regulating my body, like, and then I was putting the glasses on when I was like, well, it's nighttime in Dublin now, going home. So I was like, I'll put these on even though it was still daylight in the States, kind of way. And I found it made a huge difference. Maybe again a bit of placebo, but I had no issues getting back, like zero jet lag both ways, and I put it down to those factors. Again, just with travel, you've traveled so many places. Now, I know what to travel to. It's kind of probably like you get there, you present, and maybe you don't get an awful lot of opportunity to see where you've gone to. But out of all the places you've seen, what are some of your top favorite spots?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of places, and if it's like a new place, and especially like it seems like a really cool place, I try to build in a couple days on either side, right? Because that's one of the benefits. I said, if I'm gonna, it's really interesting. Before CFSC, I had never really traveled anywhere. Like I said, I'm born and raised in Massachusetts, and then I remember when Brendan Rierick was moving to California, we said, hey man, like before you leave, let's go do like a 2-week trip to Europe. That was the first time I'd ever been to Europe, and little did I know I would be traveling back and forth there like over 20 something times. Like now I've been to like 23 countries, I think.
Wow.
So I have a soft spot for Brazil. And if Felix is listening to this, Carlos Felix is our partner down in Brazil who takes us CFSC down there for CFSC Brazil. He brings us to Rio. There's something about Rio that I really, really like.
Yeah.
There's some the beaches, there's some beautiful hiking. It's a casual lifestyle. Like it's a good Mike Boyle location. Like you can wear sandals everywhere. You go have a beer at the kiosk, you go work out. Like it's just, they're very active. Like there's a really nice way of life down there that at least where we go. So I've really enjoyed Brazil. People are good. Probably the coolest travel experience I've ever had, I always say, is I went to the DMZ in the Joint Security Area in
Wow.
North Korea.
What was that like?
It was, I taught there. The people in Korea are amazing. The people who bring us over for CFSC are unbelievable. And they were like, you need to do this. And so you pay, it was really cheap. I think it was like $60, and they send the bus into your hotel. They pick you up at like 7 a.m. and you're there all day. So they take you, you see the tunnels that they found North Korea had dug underneath. Yeah. That's a big tourist area now in South Korea. And then they bring in the Joint Security area, and it's those blue buildings you see in the pictures. And you're on the border, you're standing, straddling the line, and they take you into the conference rooms. That was really cool to me. I said, okay, this is something that is really like once in a lifetime type of thing to see. Yeah. And at that point, when I went, it was when the tensions were very high. So there was a feeling like, okay, this is like kind of crazy that I'm standing here right now. That was, from a travel experience, was one of my most memorable for sure. So, and Seoul's a wonderful city too. I really enjoyed it there. So I'm pretty adventurous with food, and I'm a pretty kind of independent person. So I'm happy to try. Like sometimes I'm traveling solo, but I'm happy to just go out and explore things because you don't have to worry about anybody else. You know, you just kind of hop on a bus and go.
Man, that sounds like it was savage. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, highly recommended if anybody gets to Korea for sure.
I used to live with a like back in the day. I used to live in this. I used to rent a room in this house, and it used to be an bread and breakfast, the house I lived in, so it was massive. So there was like 10 of us like living in this house. It was huge, like. But the great thing about it was a bit of a halfway house too, like because people be coming and going. Some people might be staying, like living there 5 years, or people were coming and going for just a week or two, almost like an Airbnb. But there was this South Korean couple that stayed there, and they were lovely, lovely people. Like, you know, and they were telling me all about their culture and what they thought about North Korea and all that. But the reason I bring this up too was that one of the funniest things that ever happened with the guy from this couple. So his name was Tahoe. I always remember from like Lake Tahoe. So that's how he'd say, he'd be like, Lake Tahoe. I don't know why I sound Italian when I said that. But anyway, he goes like, Lake Tahoe. He says, that's how my name sounds. So Tahoe was his name. But I remember he told me he was Buddhist, right? And I walked into the kitchen one day, and there he is, tucking into a massive piece of steak. And you're Buddhists or vegetarian, you know what I mean? So I said to him, I go, oh, I thought you were a Buddhist. And he goes, yeah, I am. And I was like, but I thought Buddhists were vegetarians. And then this is brilliant, in his really broken English. And again, I can't do a broken South Korean English accent, but in his broken English, he turns to me and he says, are you Catholic? And I was like, I'm not, but I know what you're trying to say because I'm Irish and that's the big religion here. But go on, keep going. I get where you're going. And he goes, well, in Catholic Bible, it say no sex before marriage. And I say, yeah, I know that. I say, yeah, it does say that, or that's a God, or that's what they say in the in Catholicism, no sex before marriage. And then he looks at me and goes, guideline. And then he looks at me and he looks at the steak and he goes, Buddhism, no eat meat, guideline.
It's a life lesson there.
I just thought, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. So you talk about South Korea just reminded me of him. Now, tell me this: is there anything you do on a daily basis that's essential to your day? And I know I've been saying this in my last few podcasts. Andy Galpin, Dr. Andy Galpin, he hates this question because he thinks if you need to rely on one thing every day that you're not robust enough. But I still like a daily habit.
No, like one thing, I'll think of one thing I've really tried to focus on and add recently in the last year is the mindfulness every day.
Yeah.
Sitting down and taking 10 minutes. Like I don't look at my phone right when I get up. I try to say, okay, let me sit down, think about my day, do some deep breathing, and then like write down my list of like the things I need to get done. Cause it's very easy right when you get out of bed to start the rat race. Like I'll already have texts. I'll already have notifications. Like from the second you wake up, you have someone hounding you. Right. And when you start to feel like the world's chasing after you, then you're like, you're doing too much. Right. So I started to be like, okay, I got to stop and be mindful, spend 10 minutes every morning, do some meditation and breathing, and then clear my head out and start to prioritize my day. So that is something that I've been really trying to practice. And that is a game changer because the last month when I traveled in March, April, and May, I was going like nonstop. It was busy CFSC time.
Yeah.
We had some shifting and coaches. So I was really busy and I started to lose my routines. And I can always tell like when my house gets a little messier or like when my things aren't in order, then it's a big physical sign to me that I'm not being mindful. And so I started to bring that habit back in and it changes everything for me. So I think you need some mindfulness practice, at least for me.
And it's something that you can control and do anywhere, wherever you are. So it allows you to start the day with a win. I was actually having a discussion with a good friend of mine in the gym yesterday, and it's funny you talked early on about sustainability because this guy who I see at the facility now every morning or almost every morning, he's in and he comes in and all he does is intervals on the assault bike, ball slams, and up and down the stairs. And he keeps going to me. He goes, I know it's not scientific, Robbie, but I do. And I said, his name's Senan. And I said, Senan, it's all about sustainability, man. You just come in, show up, do what you can that day. And like he's every time he comes in, he goes, I'm telling you, the day you told me about that sustainability thing, because he's been to the gym, he's come every morning. Because before he'd do like lows and kill himself, and then he'd go away for a while. And I was like, Senan, it's just show up every day and do what you can do. That's it. Whatever your body can do that day, or whatever you feel like doing. And he's coming every morning. Some days he'll do more, some days he'll do less. And he looks great now. And he's all like, it's that sustainability thing he told me.
Yeah. Change his mindset, man. 52 weeks a year. Like you just want to keep showing up every time. So,
but I was having a discussion with him yesterday about these wins. That's where I originally started with this. So you just talking about having 10 minutes of mindfulness. Is that, and I call it controlling the controllables. So like you are in control of, I won't turn on my phone and I'll take 10 minutes. You can do that anywhere around the world. So that's something that you can always do anywhere you want. So like even when I was interviewing Daniel Davey, who's the performance nutritionist for Leinster Rugby and Dublin Senior Football here in Ireland, which are two of the most successful teams of all time. He says he makes his bed first thing in the morning because he's like, it's like, now he didn't say this, but like to me, it's probably because it's a little win. It's something that that you have a decision, you can decide to do it or not to do it. And if you do, it's like, I win. For me personally, it's a cold shower. Every morning for the last 7 years, cold shower. For me, it's this kind of thing like, right, I'm facing the shower, winter, summer, spring, fall, doesn't matter. I'm like, I can go in, conquer this shower, or I could be a coward and walk out. And it's like, I get in and I do it. Sometimes it's 30 seconds. Sometimes it could be 3 minutes. Depends on the temperature and what I'm feeling. But it's like, after I do it, one, you feel invigorated as fuck. But then you're kind of like, no matter what else happens today, I have that win. I conquer that little sort of mental game there, So it's something nice to always do. So the mindfulness piece to me kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, no, having habits like that where because they say like how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Like you said, you make your bed, it sets your tone for the day.
Yeah.
For me, like Mike talked about, like, hey, can you read 10 pages a day, right? And it seems really minor, but again, it keeps a learning mindset. I find if I consistently read something every day, or I consistently listen to a podcast, even if it's like maybe on the ride to work, I want to listen to, Found My Fitness. We talked about Rhonda Patrick.
Yeah.
Lots of science in that, right? Maybe on the way home when I'm tired, I listen to music, right? You find like the mindset that supports that. But if you continually remind yourself, like, okay, I'm learning, I'm growing, or I have these habits where you say you challenge yourself, like the cold shower, or, hey, let me make sure I go for a walk every single day because it's good for me. Like these tiny little things, they create a different mindset for you. And it's easy. Like we talked, then going back to habits, when you're traveling, you lose some of these things, right? And that's when you get out of your routine. So like you said, you don't want to have to rely on one habit all the time and be rigid, but there's things that help you be productive, and there's things that help you put yourself into a good state of mind, and you need to have those. And I think the cold shower is a good one. That's what Scotty George Ackles, who works for me, he'd be a great conversation for you on here actually as well.
Yeah,
he's a big cold shower and ice guy, and he
Wim Hof.
Yeah, he's a Wim Hof guy through and through. And so he's helping me build that habit, was the cold shower. That was a hard one for me at first.
It's funny too, because I nearly feel I've interviewed Andy Galton before, and I nearly, next time I talk to him, I'm like, well, Andy, do you not realize that that's your habit, not to have a habit?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So that is your habit, or that is sort of like the daily habit you have is not to have a routine. So I've 3 more here for you, and then I'll let you go because you got it. I know that you're, like 5 minutes behind schedule for you. It's like
it's my dad's birthday today, so
I'm
gonna go see them. Yeah, well, so I gotta go. He has a habit. He does 1 push-up for every day every year he's been alive on his birthday. So we have to do 62 push-ups today. So that will be later today. So I'm getting ready for that.
Enjoy that. But Kev, how do you learn? What is your learning process? And it's kind of a nice segue because you just spoke about reading the 10 pages a day and make sure you keep learning and growing. But what is your learning process? So there's a topic that you really want to understand and master. How would you go about that process?
Yeah, I'm a big reader, and I'm the type of person, I'm kind of more of an introvert when it comes to learning. So I read and then I write notes. Like I learn by writing things down. So like I'll read a book and then write down a bunch of key things that I learned from it, and I highlight it and I go back to those bullet points and things like that. So, and then I'll try to find all the podcasts and do the same thing. Right. So I try to find, like with the brain research, when I started to see that stuff popped up, I went and I found any of the research I could find that was relevant to the things that related to brain health and exercise and lifestyle. Then I went and I found all the books. I did a lot of reading just about Alzheimer's and cognitive decline, and I wrote all the notes down from that. So I read and then write because I need that physical part of it to kind of internalize it. And then from there, I try to put it through my strength and conditioning filter. Like Mike taught me really well to be like, okay, how does this affect the program that I know and love, and how does it affect how I'm going to change that, right? And it's usually a small little tweak. A bunch of small little tweaks over time lead to big things. So I always try to put it in the filter of what I'm already doing.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Kev, what is your top and current book recommendation? So your number 1 book that you'd give away, and what are you currently reading?
The number 1 book I give away is The 4 Agreements.
Man after my own heart. Absolutely.
Oh, God. Well,
that's a reread. That book.
Oh my! Yeah, that's one that stays on my coffee table. If I go upstairs,
Do you ever listen to the? Sorry to interrupt. Do you ever listen to the audio?
No, should I?
He reads it. It's phenomenal. I've read the book like a number of times. Read it, listening to it because it's your man Don Miguel Ruiz who reads. I'm nearly sure it's him, but it's someone with this beautiful voice, and it's like, it's amazing.
When you have someone who reads the book themselves, it's different. It is different. Like when you have someone who really rather than like the normal audiobook guy. I don't know who reads those, but like when it's the author, it's special. And you know who else? You know who else's favorite book that is? Someone very special. Tom Brady.
Really?
Just so you know. But no, that's one that, like, because no matter how much you try to practice what's in that book, you sometimes need a reminder of all the things that are in that book. So that's my book I would give away. I've given that book to dozens of people. Just in case
you keep talking about it, I'm just actually looking to see if it's him who reads it in my Audible here. Go ahead.
So that is the book I would give away for sure. And then the book that I would my favorite book is Go Wild. Still is probably the best book I've read in the last few years.
Go Wild,
which is John Rattay, who also wrote Spark.
Okay.
And it talks all about, it's really the movement is medicine idea. Spending more time outside. Biophilia, the idea that we should be in nature and we should be outside and get vitamin D and the benefits and research that come with that as it relates to stress and health, exercise, all of these things. And again, the things that we know we should be doing, but stressing more how important they are. So that's probably, in the last few years, that's still probably my favorite book.
Sweet. That'll be in the show notes. I was actually wrong. It isn't Don Miguel Ruiz who reads it. It's a guy called Peter Cote, Coyote, I think. But his voice is lethal. But you're so right, isn't it? You know when you get an audiobook and it's like one of these things where you're like, yeah, and the voice is terrible, like, oh no. And then other times you're like, yeah, and it's a really good voice, like, yes.
Yes. Yeah, you
read that. Yeah, it really makes a difference. All right, sorry, I know I said 2, but these are the last 2 now. Kev, you're going on the Starship Enterprise. You're leaving planet Earth forever. So it's a one-way ticket to the stars, baby. How would you spend your last year and why?
I would probably spend as much time with my family here. One,
Yeah.
because of the fact that I've been traveling so much.
You're
And
the opposite. Everyone like, no more travel, no more travel.
yeah, yeah, and I love it. But like you begin like I would say Boston, like it's probably similar to like it's not maybe as rainy as Ireland, but like when I come back, I'm like, I really love it here, even though like it's only nice 3 months of the year. The weather sucks the rest of the time, right? It's cold. But I come home and I'm like, I really am happy to be here, like with my family's here and my friends here and the
Yeah.
things that I'm familiar with. So I would probably go. My parents live on a beautiful place in Massachusetts in Hull. They live right by the water. I'd probably spend a lot of time there.
Probably just
Uh,
watch the Patriots win their Super Bowl. Yeah.
yeah, probably, just hang out there, take a walk on the beach with them. Like I really like that's what I'm going to do today. And
Sweet.
I'd probably try to just hang out there before I got on the Starship Enterprise.
Man, it's a common theme that I've seen so much lately in a lot of people I'm interviewing as they sort of head into their late 20s, 30s, and 40s. Um, that they seem to put more and more emphasis back on family. So because as I asked that question, most people are actually answering like, family. And, my follow-up question really is like, would you have answered that the same way, would you say 10 years ago? And they're like, no, I wouldn't have said family at all. Like,
Nope.
it's just, I think as we get older, we start to appreciate like the sacrifices our family has made. I made a joke the other day. It's like, I actually sat down one day to see how much money I cost my parents, and when I got to €100,000, I just stopped. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like
really
you're
appreciation for the things.
yeah, you're there like add up, okay, nappies, baby food. Then you're going through all your years, elementary, school uniform, school books, and it's like all the shit they bought me that I wanted, like tracksuits and phone,
Yeah.
Christmases and birthdays, and just like help with college and just money loans that you needed for stuff. And it's just like, yeah, anytime I give out with my parents again, I'm just going to remind myself of this.
Yeah,
So,
seriously. You start to appreciate like mortality as you get older and your family gets older, and you realize like you want to spend as much time with these people as you can. And again, this is another thing that Mike Boyle taught me. Like you say how much people start to shift their values, and
yeah.
Mike will even say that like when you're early in your career, you work nonstop, and then you start to think like I want to spend more time with my family, right? Like I've seen Mike do that transition and be like, he doesn't miss a lacrosse game or a hockey game. And to me, that's really inspiring because you have to put your value in things other than just your work, as passionate as you might be. And that's something when you work a lot, you begin to appreciate that more.
But that's why he left the Red Sox ultimately too. I
Yeah.
remember he just left in 2014 when he came to Ireland, and I was like, because like for anyone listening, like imagine leaving the Red Sox. They just won the World Series and the money's good, like, and of course it is a lot of work and all, but Mike just said my family since they came first. So big time. It's kind of like, and you'll appreciate this too. It's like, and I'm not too sure if Mike said this, but I've definitely heard it was like, before 40, say yes to everything. It's like, but after 40, you'll start saying no to everything.
Yeah. I think that's a shift you have to make. And I think it's really important to understand you do have to work a lot, right? I think sometimes you got young people, and I say young people, like these damn young people. I'm 31, but you got people who like at 19 or 20 or 22, like I don't want to hear about your work-life balance as much, because work, like you need to work.
Yeah.
And we go back to saying, hey, like we did 14-hour days at MBSC. Like I want to, like you have to learn that way, I think. And I think that's, they say evolution of a strength coach is like evolution of your work career. Like you have to be a little bit imbalanced at some point, I think, to make the progress you need. And then you have to find a way to juggle things a little bit more.
All right. Bring me for dinner. 5
Yep.
people. You can bring 5 people to this dinner. So you've heard me ask this question before. So you probably had a little bit of thought maybe into it. So you can bring 5 people to dinner, dead or alive. Who would you invite and why?
Well, I'm going to go back to the family idea. I don't have any grandparents anymore. And I lost my father's father when I was very young. And we had time together, but I was fairly young when I lost him. So I'd like to have my 4 grandparents there.
Great.
Because again, you start to realize like and you're young, so you can't appreciate family. Like you love your family, but
Yeah.
you when you're older, you're like, I really wish I had more time with these people. So I would have those 4 people, and now I have to have a 5th person, right?
Yeah.
And there's a 5th person who I really want to have dinner with in my life, and that's Tom Brady. I'm the biggest Patriots fan there is, so it would be my grandparents and him. That would be a pretty cool dinner to sit at, I think.
And I'd say he would have no problem doing that. Like
I think
sitting
he would
down with
too.
you and 2 pairs of grandparents.
Yeah.
He seems to be a pretty good dude. Kev, listen, this was an absolute pleasure. I know you got to get going, so I'll wrap this up real quick. So for anyone that wants to reach out to you or connect with you, where are the best places to go? And I'll link them up in the show notes.
If you want to get information about training and see what we do, at Movement is Medicine on Instagram is kind of like our running blog. We put a lot of stuff up there, a lot of videos, a lot of information. So I would check that out for training. And if you're interested in education, certifiedfsc.com, CFSC, we have our list of all our events. We're pretty much all over the world. We pretty much have at least 3 events a month, all over the place. So that's where you're going to catch our education.
Good. I'll be linked up to Sean. So Kev has to run here, so I won't keep him any longer. But for everyone listening, spoiled rotten people, all this great information, but I truly enjoyed this conversation with an absolute savage human being. So Kev, I really do appreciate it. But for everyone listening, peace.
Thank you.